So, hey everyone, like Dan said, I'm going to be talking about how you kind of went from automation 0 to hero, kind of roll you through this real quick. No. Oh, there we go. I have to click. Sorry, I'm not a Google Slides person. So just FYI, I'm Dan. I've been in search for 12 years. This is my daughter Harper and a Darth Vader mask. I'm the VP of search at Local SEO Guide. We're a full shop boutique local SEO agency. Thing that's known about me is I will buy you a beer. Hopefully that will happen someday and we can start meeting people in person again. But yeah, a little bit about me. And I have a 1-year-old. She's really cute and fat babies are awesome. This is my obligatory slide of clients so that you have to listen to me. Okay, so relevant stuff for today on how going from, we went from nothing in automation to having a successful automation program. First of all, I am not a developer. Clearly, after listening to Reza's talk, you can kind of hear his background in some of the more technical pieces of SEO and development. And I don't have that. I have a graduate degree in political science and got into SEO during the 2008 financial crash. So, you know, I don't have any of that experience whatsoever and have taught myself coding kind of after the fact because kind of relevant to the second point, I have product experience running our internal tools at agencies I've worked at, right? So having the ability to be able to be communicative with developers and run like internal tools from a product perspective has kind of given me a relevant point of view to kind of help in this, I think. And then the kind of second part is I feel like I'm decent at the business of SEO. This isn't meant to be like a humble brag or anything like that, but just I think that this is like a relevant story for people to help them kind of like work and build their automation platforms. We recently open sourced a couple of automation pieces that I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from and have kind of convinced me to put together a talk like this, right? Because as kind of the thing that I hear back from people overwhelmingly is, how did you do it, right? Like, how did you create an automation stack or automation pipeline? And to be honest, it's a pretty hard process, right? And it requires kind of these things that I was talking about before, which is having some product experience or working to get it and focusing on the business of SEO, right? And so anyway, that's the story I'm going to tell you all today. And it's called Dan versus the World. So I spent a lot of time talking to people in large and small agencies to kind of see what they did with automation, right? Because I was kind of curious at how people were scaling a lot of really complicated technical SEO processes. Things like lighthouse reports across millions of pages, performance reporting, large scale link footprints, all the stuff that kind of that people are talking about in the hip, cool SEO spaces these days related to automation and scale. And after talking to a bunch of people in agencies, the kind of big thing that I realized is one of the biggest problems with automation is the centralization, right? That there are lots of cool processes and ways to leverage coding and automation to make SEO's jobs easier, but they're usually isolated to teams, a particular technical SEO or a team lead or like a division head, right? There's very little centralization. And so that was kind of the first process I wanted to take off and kind of work to solve, because I saw that as the biggest roadblock. So my first challenge was the CEO, right? If anybody knows anything about me or our business, the first place I went to is Andrew Schottland, our CEO, because it's you got to get that buy-in, right? Like, this is where having product experience and working to kind of get your budget and focusing on the business helps you build actual automation, right? And so wanting to get budget from our CEO, I was just like, what's the best way I can work to kind of start leveraging and showing the value of an automation program? The solution, after a lot of thought, was honestly to build infrastructure, right? Like, not hardware infrastructure or like cloud infrastructure or anything like that, but systems infrastructure, so that we had kind of tools to be able to deploy in various different ways. The most important part of that is the kind of core of our automation platform, which is Node.js and Puppeteer, right? When we were looking for an infrastructure to kind of initially build, Node.js and Puppeteer made tons of sense, right? They have multiple use cases in our business. Not only can you use them for like crawling and scraping the web and also engaging in like form fills and stuff like that, but you can also engage in things like render and performance testing, which Reza talked about and Jamie will be talking about later. And so there's all these kind of both automation and like technical SEO processes you can use with this stack, right? It's also super easy to scale. It's relatively lightweight. Like I said, you can scale it over thousands of pages, millions of pages, hundreds of sites. It works honestly quite well. One of our largest automation projects is on a Fortune 500 company that has 300 individual web domains, right? So and they have tens of thousands of pages apiece. So you can do all kinds of cool stuff over a large infrastructure or over a large footprint with Node.js and Puppeteer. Also, it's easy to iterate and develop, like to rapidly develop on, right? Like, because it's an infrastructure, it is a rendering agent essentially that goes around and is part of Evergreen Chrome, right? And so you can do things like, well, actually, I'll put a pause on this and get to this in a second. Anyway, net built infrastructure, showed it to Andrew, and this tweet is a kind of representative of some of the feedback he gave me, which is like, you're just sitting here trying to work and improving our business, but in reality, this is like its own separate line of business. And so one of the things that we built out of this was able to drive revenue for our CEO, or revenue for our business, and make the CEO a huge believer in automation through opening up a separate business line, but also saved us a ton of time, which we'll get into later. So Dan versus the CEO. No way, Dan and the CEO, right? Like, you get that buy-in, and now you have the beginning of organizational leadership moving towards centralized automation. Okay, so who's next in this game of getting buy-in and working to build an automation program? Oh, Dan versus the project manager. So we're a fully remote agency, which is, I think, something important to mention. And as a result of being a fully remote agency, we have dedicated project management in-house, right? It's just a relevant thing with being a remote business. So got to get that project manager buy-in, or at least I wanted to get that project manager buy-in, right? And you should all focus on getting buy-ins from people who run the operations in your organizations, right? You don't actually need to get that project manager buy-in, right? It's not required, particularly if you're like equal levels of position in the organization. You don't have to do it, but it's incredibly relevant, right? Because one, they can be your biggest champion because you can get them tons of time savings and they're responsible to hours. But two, they can help you force adoption or generate adoption on all of your processes because they touch tons of stuff, right? So again, go to the organizational leadership for getting this buy-in and start working on proving the value of your stack to the people who are the real core decision makers. So, solution with the project manager. Just channeling that vanilla ice, right? And stop, automate, and listen. And this is really important, right? Because the project manager is going to have radically different goals than the rest of the organization. They're responsible for hours, right? Like, they don't care about opening up new lines of business. They don't care about creating a new quality deliverable. I mean, they do care about all of these things, right? But they're responsible to hours. They're responsible to the projects. So, super important, right? Because this is one of the areas that people traditionally talk about automation in, right? There's tons of scale work being done for humans that's low quality and low value, that's ripe for automation. It frees up budget and team members for more challenging and rewarding work, right? Like, this is where like kind of the traditional automation wins happen. However, there are some big problems here that you have to be worried about, right? Which is all of this operational infrastructure, the things that are part of your core processes that you're automating, those require support. Right? So now you have to start staffing support for everything that you build around your project manager. Otherwise, you're going to build systems that are going to break, and then you're going to have fires, and on it goes, right? This is a kind of core reason for centralization, is it's easy to kind of carve off the support stack. Okay, so focusing on the project manager's needs. So what was the solution? Pretty simple. We built an auto poster, right? Like I had mentioned before, we had Node.js and Puppeteer, so we had the ability to kind of manipulate the web and web documents and do form fills and stuff like that. So we created an auto poster to post things to Google My Business. And so we were doing automated Google My Business posting for clients. This saved us tons of money. This was what the auto poster, this is what our project breakdown was before the auto poster, where it took us 100 hours for this particular sprint. After the auto poster, you can see it saved us about 50 hours net. And so, major time savings by having the auto poster. Like I had mentioned earlier with the CEO, this was also opening up a new line of business, right? Now we had a tool to be able to sell people on Google My Business auto posts. And so 2 wins, right? Time savings for the project manager, new line of business for the CEO. So, building that automation stack to service your existing needs, get that buy-in. Dan versus the project manager? No way. Dan and organizational leadership, right? And that's how you can work to kind of focus that automation stack and get it kind of deployed throughout your organization. Okay, the last one. And this is the one that I think most people kind of assume is going to be your biggest ally. They assume that this is going to be your best friend in focusing on automation. Dan versus the technical SEO. Let me tell you, they are not your best friend here. Thanks, Hamlet Batista, right? In the current SEO environment, one of the problems, like I mentioned before, in the way that automation and coding have negative impacts in SEO agencies is all the technical SEOs or SEOs want to learn how to be entry-level developers. SEOs are not developers, right? And when they do development, they generally do it poorly. This is a thing that is kind of surfacing now a lot in the technical SEO space, right? And so, you know, your technical SEOs, or at least my technical SEOs and other SEOs, they want to be able to deploy this stuff themselves. They want to invest time in learning Python, learning scripting, and doing all this stuff. They don't want to use, they don't want to like help work building products that can help make it so that automation happens to make it so that SEO and technical SEO analysis is easier, right? That's just not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about their job, not the organization. There's only one solution for something like that: overwhelming force, right? Like, you just have to show them that your way is the right way, right? Like, you have to show them that working through the organization is going to be the way to like the technical SEO and automation success and do all the cool things that they want to, without having to take on a ton of extra responsibilities for their job. So what I did, I just started to make stuff and throw them at my technical SEOs, to be quite honest, in order to save them time on their jobs. So the first thing we did is, like I mentioned before, we built our initial infrastructure was Node.js and Puppeteer. And so one of the things that we used to build that with is to build a Lighthouse, scalable and aggregatable Lighthouse reporting stack. And so what this does is let you look at Lighthouse metrics from, or Lighthouse performance metrics from Google across an aggregated number of pages. And you can look at this screenshot here. We basically let you like template, like assign a category label to the type of pages. So you can see how performance works across page templates. You can see how assets work, like JavaScript or CSS or images work across page templates or holistically. So you can get a better view of their footprints. But basically, I made the technical SEO's job easier in terms of doing performance reporting, right? I made it so that they could just get a report, look through it, and surface a lot of the cool stuff. Great, easy to make their job easier. Keep going, keep going. Overwhelming force, remember? And so we plugged it into Slack, right? All of our automation runs through Dockerized instances of our scripting server. And so we have everything plugged into a robot named Jarvis in Slack. It basically lets our team members be self-serve with some of our automation. And so this allows my technical SEO to run a Lighthouse reporter for a particular site, get it back, get the Google Data Studio report generated, and be able to do their analysis. But seriously, you just have to like keep leveraging that infrastructure. And I don't mean to like beat a dead horse, but you got to beat your SEOs over the head with it very gently with phone bats, right? You got to make a GDS reports for everything, right? Like I mentioned, we use this Node.js and Puppeteer infrastructure in order to create a bunch of automation tasks and technical SEO tasks. So some of our, we use Data Studio as a front-end reporting for this so that our SEOs and team members don't have to like log into BigQuery and the things that we use for storing data, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the things that we've made available for our SEOs to use via Jarvis in Data Studio is a plugin to the SEMrush API in order to do keyword research at scale, in order to look at search footprints at scale, a plugin to the Majestic API in order to help us better build link footprints to help with our link building efforts. We have an ngram script in order to take a lot of the data we get through these various processes and bucket them into categories and get that back at you. Lighthouse reporting and auto posting, like I had said. And so this gives you the infrastructure, like I had mentioned, to constantly iterate. And your technical SEO is, they're the ones that are going to care more about how it helps them do their jobs, less about how it helps improve the business, right? And so this is where you really have to like put on your product manager hat and start thinking about what things that you need to keep pushing out. And so for the future, right, we're working on a few things right now to pull some really good data out of Search Console that you can't get via their API, and have a natural language processing process that we're working on right now that we're eventually going to get plugged into Jarvis. And so there's all this kind of cool stuff you can do once you have this infrastructure that you built with a really basic use case used to prove out the value of your stack across all your core roles, right? And get everybody to kind of be on board. So again, Dan versus the technical SEO, no way. Dan in the org versus the world, right? Like I had mentioned, I had spent a bunch of time talking to organizations about how they're doing this kind of automation. And I can tell you that most of them don't do it like this, right? That there's a huge opportunity for the organizations that can centralize their automation and like scripting stacks in order to drive success across the whole organization rather than in pockets of it, right? And so I'm happy to get my organization on board in order to start moving forward with this. Most importantly, though, is the SEO that's driving automation versus themselves, right? This is a fundamental shift in job roles for a lot of people. If you're working on championing automation inside your organization versus being an SEO, you need to kind of prioritize your time and training and how you level up yourself in order to be able to focus more on the business and growing your business of SEO rather than just creating cool SEO tactics and strategies, right? There's always a place for cool SEO tactics and strategies. And like I mentioned, it helps like get your SEOs on board to use your automation stack. But this is, when you champion this, it's honestly a fundamental shift for how you work in your organization and something that you always have to kind of worry about in terms of your time and your prioritization. I want to give a shout out to Brian and Sam. I don't do this on my own. Brian Heckler and Sam Capehart are our technical ops team. Sam's a full-time backend JavaScript dev, and Brian does our Python scripting and helps me with the product management. This is a group effort, and like when I say that it helps you build out a team over time, it really does. We also recently added Celia Fisher, shout out, as a junior product manager to help us push things live more and help us better focus our automation. TLDR, it all starts with infrastructure, and you got to get that bread. Thanks. You can check out our GitHub here. We're going to start posting more things. I have a new GSC thing we're going to launch in a couple of days. Hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully y'all are Scott Pilgrim fans.